That's 5 hours of my life I'm never going to get back. This is going to conclude the series on YouTube about the mosques that we've encountered across the entire country of Turkey. And today I've driven about 5 hours after 2 fails this morning. And that's led me onto a nice video topic, because we're going to talk location, finding locations, going to them. And I'm going to kind of give you the behind the scenes of what happened on this photography series. Let's get on into this mosque and we'll talk some more. So in a kind of roundabout way, this sums up my day kind of nicely. It sums it up. Of course, when you turn up to a location like this, especially a disused location, you never quite know what you're walking into. And that's the theme of today. I'm going to do a tiny little bit of tidying up so I can get some sort of shots. The things I don't care about are things like this white table and some other bits and pieces. So I'm just going to crack on and move them before I can get some shots. Which is not ideal, because there's like an hour of daylight left. So I'm going to do that and then we can chat. And instantly you've seen what's happened when I've kicked up dust. We've created a kind of light ray. So that's what we're going to work with here. First, we're going to get rid of some of this mess, especially from the other side. I knew that there was a lot of these disused mosques. I found one, and it kind of inspired me to do a lot of research. Loads of news articles, digging out other locations countrywide. And the more I dug, the more I realised that sometimes places that were the heart of the community, like these mosques, are now being filled with people's storage and junk, and they've been forgotten about. Pipes. I've seen so many pipes on my journey around Turkey. These are not the first ones. I've seen 2 sets of pipes today alone in these places. And you can see it's quite a mess, but actually makes for quite interesting images. I really enjoy these kind of ones. This is the stuff that I've realised I now enjoy when it comes to these locations, is when it's filled with stuff. That's what I'm looking for, basically. Looks interesting. It's not just the same old mosque, you know. Really cool. Unusual location, really. I've opted for the 24mm. So the topic of today's video isn't, of course, talking about gear or settings or any of this. It's about wrapping up the series as a whole. Challenges I faced, the locations I came across, the challenges of photographing them, but also, of course, the inspiration behind the whole thing. Let's get this shot. I mean, it's coming up to 2 years ago, I actually found one of these old mosques. I'd done some research, I dug out some details, and I found out that it was in a tiny little village in the Izmir region. So I drove there, up a windy road, got to the top of this sort of mountain peak, maybe 2 hours off the main road, and I'd pretty much driven into a farm. I went up, walked up with a language barrier and asked the gentleman, does he mind if I go in and take some photos? He kind of laughed, he was kind of a bit surprised. Didn't mind, I walked on in. To my surprise, there was still loads left. It looked quite epic, but it had really difficult lighting. Little did I know that was going to be the theme throughout these mosques. So I remember going home that evening and started researching heavily into these locations and started to uncover they were pretty much countrywide. So why was remoteness a problem, I hear you ask? Well, I covered it briefly in one of the other videos, and that is me foreigner turning up into a remote village, sometimes in conservative parts of the country, armed with camera, gear, drone, and so on, was always going to be a slight problem. It would create a tension. So that was the first challenge I had to overcome. So you probably heard that background noise, and that's exactly my point. Alerting attention, especially to local kids, is kind of hard. It's not that I don't like interacting with the locals outside the place, I do, but I'm an unusual character to be involved in a mosque. I don't know how they're going to react to it. I also don't know how they're going to react to me even being in the village. It's unusual for them. I've got expensive gear, so on and so forth. And the children normally hang in groups, they crowd you, and of course they attract the attention of adults. And there's been loads of cases I've had of this. So that's the first challenge I had to overcome. So most of the time I was trying to target these places quietly, effectively, and I was just trying to get in and get out, and if I could, I was doing it as early as possible, and also trying to target it during the times of the day when the prayers were going on, because I realised people's attention was kind of elsewhere, and it was of course much noisier. So the next big challenge I knew I was going to face was going to be the distance. Turkey is a huge country, and today alone I've done 5 hours. I've got another 2 to my hotel, 7. That's grand distances. But I knew the legwork might be worth it in the long run if I dug in there. The problem was I knew there might be the chance that sometimes I would turn up to a location and it would be destroyed, vanished, or in such a state that I actually couldn't get images, or maybe it's locked up and I can't get in. Unfortunately, that's the kind of nature of the beast. It's just the way things are with this stuff sometimes. And it is kind of really what my job is all about. Then we would get to the location and we would have the challenge of how to photograph it. Of course, I'm just rocking up at the set time of day that I can get there on the road trip, which is not ideal. So there has been occasions where the place has been worth it. So what I've done sometimes is I've waited it out or targeted the location the next morning, gone back. And on one occasion, I even targeted the place at golden hour, and you saw that in a previous video, where I went in at the right time of day, and that helped me to illuminate the frescoes on the back wall. Turns out this one's actually really cool, by the way, really nice location. So now the sun's gone, we can move on to detail shots, and that's pretty much what I did for the majority of my time photographing these locations, is always try and get the killer shot first and then move on to the details. So like plan out a method of attack almost. And the reason why I was doing that was really because I wanted to get the wow shot. For example, I walked in here, there's this stunning light going off, I had to move some stuff around, had to be quite quick on my feet. Of course, the video doesn't help, but the idea being if I get the killer shot first, or the shot that is happening because of the environment and the elements, then the details are going to sit there for much longer and I can capture them later. Most of the time I had problems with lighting. There were some locations, especially earlier on, where there's a window on every side of these spaces. So it's difficult to say, well, I'm going to target this at golden hour, it's going to give a nice glow. Other times you'd walk in, it was just filled with light, usually nasty patterns all over the floor. So planning out a method of attack, usually on the long drives, was always the way that I was going about it. However, that isn't the main challenge in terms of photography when it came to these locations. There was a bigger one. And that came in the form of composition. It's very easy to walk into a space like this and just say, I'm going to photograph a corner, I'm going to do the straight shot. But I realised if I was going to pull together a whole series that it was going to get quite repetitive and pretty boring. So I started to look at ways to try and mix it up, vary the shots. And actually, I started trying to find locations that maybe had stuff in them, filled with stuff like this one, because it gave it a little bit more interest and drama. And of course, a little bit controversial too. So my idea originally was to have like a main shot and then like a detail shot next to it on my webpage. As the series grew, I realised the best thing to do, the best approach would actually be to photograph as many of them as I could, because I know that there's not going to be a big chance of them surviving for much longer, to be honest. And then I realised that it's best to have a good selection and then be able to pick the best images out of that selection. So that's what I started doing. Now I incorporated a new tool into my workflow to help me bring this series alive. The guys over at Luminar Neo reached out to me around about a year ago, and I've been testing their products thoroughly to try to incorporate them into my workflow. So Luminar Neo actually has some amazing tools for interior and architecture photographers. Exposure blending, HDR techniques of course are in there, focus stacking and cataloguing your images to be able to kind of look through them and select ones you want to keep, the keepers, the ones to chuck away. I didn't use any of those though for this final series. I used primarily all of their tools they've got available to color grade my images. And with their actual package, I was able to go through and start toning these mosque images to put it together in my final results. And they are fantastic. If you like what you've seen in any of my images in the final results, then check out their discount codes below. So the main question I get asked, usually when I'm doing camera club talks, is how do you find these locations? And I've given you a little bit of an insight today as to how I actually went about this. And people will say, well, how did you know, like, is it going to be there? Is it available? And no, the answer is no. When you go searching, looking, there's a lot of negative days as well as positive. But I believe that the positive way outweigh any of the negative experiences. Walking in like I did today to this one, I didn't know it was going to be packed full of stuff. I didn't know what was going to be inside. And actually, I've got some pretty amazing photos, I believe, here with this light ray coming in when I timed it well. Finally, as well, in terms of the actual location finding, don't be scared of the challenge. People say to me a lot as well is, oh, when you go out looking for locations, isn't there a language barrier? Isn't that a problem? And is the place easy to get to? And are you going to have problems along the way? And the answer is yes, of course, it's always yes. It's all about the experience photography. It's all about the journey, not just visually, but for me also about the travel side of it too. And of course, I'm doing many of these missions these days solo, but I still try and enjoy it, smile and take the negatives with the positives. So a lot of this, of course, comes down to being highly motivated to capture a new series in a country that, of course, I'm now residing in. I knew it would be a nice thing to do. Has it been difficult and challenging? Of course it has. It's been a lot of miles, a lot of coverage, limited time usually as well on my little trips. I don't want to constantly be away from home with tours and wrecking other countries as well as doing a personal project. So I'd love to hear about projects you've done with your camera as well. Please comment below and tell me what projects you've done in the past. Maybe you've got some more coming up in the future. And if you have never experienced it or tried to do it, I highly challenge you to go out, research something, look for it, and go out and try and photograph it over a period of time. Whether that's stunning architecture in city centres, hidden in urban environments, or remote rural mosques in the middle of Turkey, or whatever it is, go out, find spots, and challenge yourself to try and get good images. That's all for this week, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. And that pretty much wraps up the entire series. The sanctuary is done. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed the videos. And until next time, bye-bye for now.